Shalom. We're in Torah portion Netzvaim, and it has to do with standing before Yahweh your Elohim. It's Deuteronomy chapter 29 verse 10 and onwards. So what's interesting, what I discovered this morning, is just the context of what's in chapter 29. The heading is renewing the covenant. So it's all about repeating or renewing the covenant with the people that's being addressed. What's also evident is that it used the language and said that it's not only for those standing here but also for those not present. And then I think in verse 9 it talks about the next generation. And the context of the next generation, it mentions the language of sulfur, salt, destruction, judgment of Yahweh, and Sodom and Gomorrah. So what we see here is the time frame after a massive event where Yahweh judged the world with fire. So where did we see that? Where did we read about that? So that's in the book of Revelation. Actually, two places. The first one is the destruction of Babylon, where hail and fire will come down, rain on the earth in the destruction, the final removal of the kingdom of Babylon. And then we also read about it at the end of the 1,000-year period, Zechariah 14, where fire will come down and devour those who are surrounding the city of Jerusalem, who want to overtake the people and destroy those inside the city. Now, this Torah portion is just after they cross the Jordan. The Jordan is a great revelation. So this definitely points to the first war. Remember, I mentioned there are two wars. The first war is Armageddon, which happens at the end of the 6th millennium, at the beginning of the 7th. And the second war is Gog and Magog. We've discussed that in the previous Torah portions. And that happens at the end of the 7th millennium, at the beginning of the 8th. So can you see the pattern is similar? The language is similar. In both cases there's fire, and in both cases there's judgment in the context of a war, or where the spiritual and the physical meet, and everything that is not in line with the spiritual will be destroyed. Just like light, when you switch it on, darkness will disappear because of its nature. It cannot exist where light is. So in the same way, this conflict is as a result of switching on the light, so to speak. So these are the people from the new generation who stepped out of the Great Revelation, crossed the border of the Jordan, and into the time frame of the 7th millennium. And what they witness is destruction. Now, what's also in Deuteronomy 29, it says that nothing will grow. There will be nothing. So how do you think the people will eat? Now, luckily, in this Torah portion, in my looking at the gematria of the 6 tribes on Mount Gerizim, there is mention of manna. There was also mention of manna, which is a coriander seed, when we look at the number 7, which has to do with the tribe of Dan, which we looked at last Torah portion. So we get the confirmation from both mountains that the people will be looked after through Yahweh providing manna, because nothing will grow. Everything is destroyed. There's no implements, there's nothing. And then we get the verse that says your implements of weapons need to be changed into implements of farming, and to produce fruit, to plow, to sow, to reap, and then you bring your fruit to Yahweh your Elohim. So that is last week's Torah portion, and that's basically a larger view of this event towards the end, where people started to grow their own produce. So there will be a time where Yahweh will look after the people right after the great destruction, the great birth, the great tribulation, and the great first war, where there will be nothing and the people will be dependent upon Yahweh. Now, in saying that, what do you think the people will experience, that next generation? What will they experience? They will see this miracle of manna. So what they are basically experiencing is exactly the same that Israel experienced in the book of Exodus, where they left Egypt. In this time, they left Babylon. And after leaving Babylon, they step into a time frame after judgment, after destruction, where there's nothing. So they would be devastated. And I also saw that in the meanings of the names and the gematria of the 6 tribes, which represent the judges that will be raised up to lead these people, just like Moses. We also saw the concept of the judges during the Great Tribulation, which are referred to the 144,000, which will be sealed, and they will be just like Moses, the judges leading the people during the time of judgment. That's why the word judge and the context of judgment is appropriate language to replace the word prophet, which is referred to as Moses, as a judge, which is similar to the prophet like Moses. Now, what the next generation is facing, they are now in the same context of receiving the covenant. So the covenant is renewed. Do you think the covenant is now modified? He's taking away a lot of stuff. It's no longer applicable. Or do you think it's the same covenant expressed to a new generation? Now, I'm just going to repeat what I always say about renewed covenant. It's like the renewed moon. It's the same moon in a new phase to a new observer. Someone in space and time is looking at the same moon from a different time period, and they see the sliver, the starting point. So this next generation is experiencing the sliver of the new moon, the starting of the revelation of light. That's the symbolism of the moon. And as you go to half moon, go to full moon, then the full revelation will come, and then the moon will be darkened and slowly grow into a dark moon, which will signal the second great war, or the time of darkness. And then the sliver will start, which will basically start the 8th millennium. So we see that moon cycle. Also saw that in last week's parashah, the cycles where I had Hagar there, the month cycle, the moon cycle, and the idea of cycles, of which the 7th millennium is one cycle. That's symbolic, similar to a 1 month moon cycle, with the emphasis of the revelation of light, and then the dimming of light and darkness, and then judgment. So we see all of those things in the same pattern. So I just want to lay some foundation for the context of this parasha. The rest of this teaching will be about looking at the 6 tribes and just emphasizing some of the aspects that will exist there, just to underline and highlight a few things that we can experience during the 7th millennium. So what's fascinating is that we read about these things, but we don't see the detail. There's no detail per se. But when you look into the gematria, the deeper layer, you see the patterns filled in with detail. So we use the framework of leaving Egypt, entering the promised land, crossing the Jordan. That's the framework. And then we hang the meanings of the gematria on those time frames, with the people involved during those time frames in the historical events, to give us an idea of what the future events might look like. So Yahweh is brilliant and is super intelligent into recording in the Torah a hidden language through the numbering system of the gematria. That's an attribute of only the Hebrew language, the supernatural language by which Yahweh created. And through that, He revealed to us what is to come. So for those who are going through the 7th millennium, I don't know if I'm going to speak to any of those people who will fall away and will eventually find themselves in the 7th millennium. Use the Torah, specifically the book of Exodus, to find guidelines in what to do during the second wilderness experience. That's my advice to people who are currently stubborn, who don't listen to Torah, who doesn't regard the Torah. The Torah is your roadmap. The Torah is your way out of that wilderness. Otherwise, you will be circling that, and at the end be part of those on the outside and not those on the inside. So take heed, the Torah is the only way to be cleansed by the cycles, which is depicted by the 7th millennium, and the final cleansing cycle, which is called the winepress. So I just want to leave you with that, and I hope you have a lovely day. Shalom.